I want to talk about capo placement now, proper capo placement, and some tips on how to get the best intonation whenever you're doing this. The biggest complaint that I get and that I've experienced as well whenever using a capo is the guitar's nice and in tune when it's an open, and then I go up and I capo and suddenly it's way out of tune. Now there's several different factors that can contribute to that, and I want to look at that, but one big one is just simply improper capo placement. Okay, so I'm going to use this Elliott capo for the rest of the lesson here, but the principles still work no matter what kind of capo you use. Let's say that we're going to go up. We know that my guitar is in tune. We're going to go up and we want a capo at the 3rd fret. Okay, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to get the capo right behind the 3rd fret. Now, there's varying opinions on this, and I've even changed my mind over the years. Used to, I would think that I need to put it right on top of the capo. I've since changed my mind. We want our capo to kind of mimic what our fingers would be doing if it was playing it. And we don't play right on top of the frets. You can have some muting issues if you don't do it exactly right. So I put it right behind the fret, and I'm going to hold it in position with this finger. I'm going to try to hold it straight up and down. I don't want to do it at an angle. So I'm going to hold it right behind there, and I'm going to just put some gentle tension to it, just enough to where it'll start to hold it in place. Now, it's not tight enough now to give us a clear tone, okay, but it's tight enough to where it's not going to move by itself. Now, to minimize the amount of tuning that I'll have to do after placing the capo on, okay, because it's going to naturally pull our strings sharp. What I will do is counteract that by applying a little pressure with my strumming hand to the strings as I tighten up the capo. Okay, this is a little harder to do with your G7th capo, but with the Elliott, this is really easy to do because now it's in place. And I'm going to take my right palm and I'm going to press against the strings, not all the way to the guitar, but just put a few pounds of pressure on it. And I'm going to do that as I tighten my capo. Okay, and that's essentially pre-stretching these strings. It's going to reduce the amount that your capo is going to draw your strings sharp. And now, how much tension do I put there? Well, I put enough to where I have clear tones, and sometimes I may even back off a little bit until I hear one start buzzing, and then I'll come back to where it's not buzzing. Okay, now I don't want to go any tighter than that, because as I go tighter, I'm going to pull the strings more and more sharp. Okay, but I want it tight enough to where whenever my hand barely touches it, it doesn't cause it to move. So now I'm capoed up 3 frets, and I'm still perfectly in tune. Overall, this chord may be a little sharp, but the important thing is I have a good guitar, I have a good capo, and so all of my strings are tuned up the same amount so that the chord is still in tune with itself. Very, very important. What's really cool with these Elliots, and with a nice guitar, you could capo it all the way up at the 12th or 14th fret. It's still going to remain in tune. Now, what happens if you do that and you're still not in tune? Let's say you do that and you go and try. I just made it out of tune on purpose, but you go to make a G chord, it sounds something like this. Okay, man, that's horrible. Okay, what could be going on there? Well, there's a couple of different things. One is your capo worn out. So at that point, I would look at my capo, and at the surface that touches the strings, and I would look to see if there's any big grooves in that rubber or plastic part. And what can happen there is some of the grooves become deeper than others. So therefore, whenever you apply the pressure, it's not going to be pressing as hard on some strings as others. So you may need, if you have a capo like this Elliott, you can adjust it, just spin it around to where I have a fresh set of rubber or plastic, whatever it is, to contact the strings. You may need to buy a new replacement piece there, and the Elliots, you're able to do that. Some of the other models like this, you're not able to do that. So for a couple bucks, I can have a spare one of these, and I'm back in tune. Now the other issue is that if you do go too tight, you can pull strings out of tune. The problem is that I can't demonstrate that very well because the Elliott capo, if you go too tight, it doesn't get all out of whack. But other capos that I have, if you do, and that I've had, if you go too tight, it can, because it doesn't apply even pressure, it can begin to pull maybe your lower strings more, put more pressure on those than on your higher strings, and therefore you start to get some tuning issues. The other thing may be it might not even be a capo issue. It might actually be a guitar issue, and you could have a fret issue. So what kind of shape are your frets in? So no matter how good of capo you have and how good your technique is, if your frets are worn out, that's all it has to work with. So depending on which strings you play the most, you may have certain grooves worn into these frets that whenever you go to capo, now your fret is not even, it's not straight all the way down, and so some strings are getting pressed more than others. At that point, you need to take it to a luthier, and they can do what's called recrowning. That's the cheaper solution. If you have enough fret wire still available, they can go in and they can just reshape all of these different fret wires so that they're all even again. You'll have good intonation. If they're worn down too much, you'll have to do a refret job, and that can be a bit more expensive. Okay, now let's look at the theory behind why we use and how we use capos.